You know, the Canada that I knew in 1963 is not the Canada of today. We change a lot, and we'll have to adjust. And we always feel that we have a big wall in front of us. And now we have to find a way either to go through the wall or above the wall or under the wall, on the side of the wall. But we have to get out.
Canada's oldest living prime minister isn't taking Western separatism lying down. Having seen Canada through the threat of Quebec separation and the Meech Lake Accord, his Clarity Act of 2000 could find new currency today. Chre is at 91, mentally sharp, and despite recent heart surgery, pretty energetic. He's bringing that energy to the same place he always has: Canada, its people, and its future. And as usual, he's doing it without pulling his punches. Chre joins us now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with this moment as the Prime Minister and world leaders are going to be gathering in Alberta for the G7. You've been there, you know these events. It feels like a really important time for Canada to be on a world stage in a new way. What would be, if you were leading that meeting, what do you think Canada needs to do to assert itself in the world right now?
I think that they are in good position in a way because there is a big problem around the globe at this time with the move by Trump. And he's disturbing a system that's been established year after year since the war. And it is a big change. It's a kind of a revolution he's causing. And the democracies are getting weaker, and they're losing, what I'd like to say is the beginning of the end of the American empire. They were dominating the world because, the money was, the reserve are based on the American dollar. He talks about trade deficit, but he never mentioned the non-trade advantages that they had over the years. Everything is coming and passing basically financially in New York. And he might destroy that. You hear the BRIC meetings at times, they're talking about finding another way to keep reserved than having American dollars. And it is a huge change if they go back to something else. So for me, for the Prime Minister, who is an expert in this field, can make a very good contribution. And he has invited India and a couple of others. So the focus will not be only on the American this time. And if they are on the Americans, it might be more negative than they expect.
One of the things that you did as Prime Minister and were part of through successive governments was a kind of a Team Canada approach to global trade. We have been talking about diversifying our trade away from the U.S. just to, create a little bit of safety, security for decades and decades, and we don't seem to do it. Do you think we can do it now?
I don't know why they have abandoned that, because when I started in 1994, in the fall of 94, I had my first Team Canada to China. We were 500 people, all the premiers but one, and the, business people and university people. And it was a huge success. And every year I had one. I had one in India, in Pakistan, in the Philippines, in Korea, in Brazil, in Germany, Russia, and so on. So it was, in my judgment, very useful for two reasons. One, it was establishing us as a presence. In most of these countries, it was the biggest trade delegation they ever received. And we were in the news. Even my books were translated in Arabic, and they were translated in Chinese and so on. It's amazing in a way. And we were very present. And now we're not present anymore. Foreign politics is not to please the audience in Canada. Is to establish good relation with the people we visit. We might be in disagreement. I'm not a communist. I will never be a communist. I have nothing to speak for them. But I don't think that because I speak, they will change the system. We have to be realist. And so China and India are extremely big. And of course, we don't like if they try to intervene in our elections. But between you and I, if they intervene in 5 or 10 ridings, they're not about to change a government in Canada. We have to be realists. We get all upset. But for years, we had Radio-Canada International. We were broadcasting our philosophy around the globe to tell them to establish a democracy à la Canada. And it was all right for that to do that. But if they do the reverse to us, is unacceptable. It's a kind of, it's typical of what happens. So for me, I look over that. And I think that, like it or not, China will be very big. They are very big. Within years, they will be bigger than the United States. And we have a complementary economy with them. So we cannot like what they do internally. But, when I remember one day I was trapped in a corner, and I was going to China, and I was tired. I was in New Brunswick, and a small room, and the press, will you tell this and tell them, and blah, blah, blah. I said, wait a minute, guys, wait a minute. I said, you want me, a country of 35 million people at that time, to go and tell a Chinese 1.5 billion people what to do? But you are the one who will tell me, but don't tell the Premier of Saskatchewan what to do. Mind your goddamn business. We have a bit too weight and two measures, as we say in French.
We do have, at the moment, a interesting situation in Canada, because on the one hand, there is a sense of kind of national pride. Everybody's pulling together. The premiers are all talking about doing away with internal trade. But we do have still some of the same old divisions that pop up. And a new one. I have to ask you about Alberta. Obviously, Western feelings about the East. I grew up in the West. I know them well. There's a sense of being kind of out of the center of power and neglected. This feels a little bit more pointed. What would your message be to Albertans? Not to Danielle Smith particularly, but to the people of Alberta.
No, but they never produce more oil than they're producing today. Trudeau bought a pipeline for them, cost $30 billion to the taxpayers of all Canada. They're not using it completely. He never received a thank you for that. He gave the permission to build a pipeline going to Texas. It was blocked in the Dakotas, and he got help from the environmentalists, the natives, and so on. Never received a thank you for that. And do you think that if they separate, it will be easier to have pipelines in west is BC, north is the north, and east is Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia to go to the Atlantic? They think that it'll be easier? And do they realize that in the United States, the control of energy is not run by the states? It's run from Washington. They will have less autonomy if they become part of United States. And if they are independent, they are a landlocked country. So, I've never been impressed by bullies. That's why I started the 11th of January, when I wrote my article, to give myself a gift to have the chance to attack Trump. We're not for sale, I said it that day. Mm-hmm. And I think that we're more united, but there will always be problems. I've been 40 years in public life. So I like to say that when to fill a hole, you dig two more, so you're shoveling all the time.
You were very much a part of the Quebec push to separate, the referendum. You were on obviously the side of the federal side of all of that question. The Clarity Act of 2000 is still an important piece of legislation. How does that play, do you think, with this move in Alberta? Does that
I
is
think
that the
that
answer?
nobody has read it in Alberta because they will read it. They will understand that they cannot do it unilaterally, because they're breaking Canada. So the Canadian have something to say too. In a divorce, there's two parties. And look at the legislation that was approved virtually unanimously in the House of Commons. And there's a lot of conditions to be met. And the question has to be clear. And after that, how to do it? What about the native rights? What about the debt? What about some international obligations and so on that they have to be met? What about defense? It's not a small cake to cook separation. And the premier, probably she will regret that, because if that creates a separatist party in Alberta, that will split the Tories. And she will make the NDP with a Liberal leader premier.
One of the other things that you presided over in your time in government was, of course, our Charter of Rights, bringing our Constitution home to Canada. I have to ask you how you've been watching Section 33, which was contentious at the time, the notwithstanding clause being used by provincial premiers now with increasing regularity. Does it worry you? Do we need to do something about it? Do you regret that it's there at all?
I was there, and it was clear in the mind of everybody around the table that the notwithstanding clause was to be used after there was a judgment of court who had found some discrimination in a piece of legislation. And after that, they could pass a legislation admitting that they are discriminating, giving the reason why, and for 5 years only. It was a way to balance the problem, because if you have definitive judgment by the court, sometimes you could have the reverse problem, that the court could decide something that we could not change. And without amending the Constitution, look at the United States. The Supreme Court passed a judgment about political spending. There's absolutely no limit. Billions of dollars. They can use all the money they want to defeat one candidate in one district. No limit. In Canada, nobody can give more than $1,700. The Royal Bank, it's all they cannot give a cent. And we have, we're not dependent on great contributions in Canada like they are. The United States, sometimes I like to say, it's no more a democracy, it's a dollarcracy type. Money, money, money. And I don't want that for Canada.
In fact, you were also part of the government that helped put that campaign finance reform
I am
in
the one who did
place.
that. It was,
yes.
It was done before in Quebec, and it was working. So I said, we'll take it for the whole country.
And that works well. I mean, in terms of kind of a model, do you think that's one that makes sense for other countries? Obviously, we see the extremes that happen in the U.S.
Nobody can give more than $1,700. So if a member of parliament is for sale for $1,700, is the evaluation of himself is not good.
You have been very active in this most recent election. You actually campaigned for the Liberals, I think, across 4 ridings, or 4 provinces, I should say.
I touch about 30 ridings or 40 ridings to see. But I enjoy it. For me, it's not it was a bit tiring for a guy of my age, but I enjoy it. I like to communicate with people. It's been my life. I was the president of the Young Liberals at Laval University in 1956. You were not very old in those days. And, so that's been my life. And I enjoy it when I can. And it was great for me to go to different provinces, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, rural Quebec, Quebec City, Montreal, Toronto, Hamilton, other place, Ottawa. And I did it. They asked me to do it, and I was pleased to be able to do that.
One of the messages of that election from some parties is this message that Canada is broken. You had a strong response to that. What do you think we make of the fact that in politics today, negative messaging seems to be, we see it in the U.S. as well?
No, it's been like that since the beginning. We had all sort of commission, Pepin, Robarts, and other before that, always debating, if Canada, what it is and what it should be. Constitutional debate was, in some years, as I used to say, the second national sport after hockey. And my first election in 1993 in Quebec, I would say, if you want to talk Constitution, don't vote for me. And so, I think that I was involved in that, the patriation of the Constitution, the Charter of Rights, and so on. I was the Minister of Justice. I was responsible for Trudeau to the first referendum, and the second I was a prime minister. So I had kind of enough of it to have other things to talk about. And it's not working. So we spent the last 60 years talking about it. And we are where we were. And we're still together and more united than ever. It's why I said, I should offer the Order of Canada to Trump. He has united Canada more than anybody. But unfortunately, I could not succeed. Do you know why? Because we don't give the Order of Canada to someone with a criminal record. That's true.
Yep. In fact, we take them away. When you think about Canada today, do you worry for it? Are you optimistic about where we stand?
Canada, I always finish my speech in saying Canada is the best and vive le Canada. I was traveling the world, all my life. I was in Siberia in 1971. So whenever I would come back to Canada, touching the soil, I would say we're the luckiest people in the world. We are. Even a few months ago, there was a global survey. They were asking the people around the globe if they had to go somewhere to start again their life, where they will go. Canada was still the number one place around the globe. So when you have it, why to drop it? Because you don't like a regulation on the environment in the oil business. But these rules apply to everybody in the land. Of course, we want to produce oil, we want to produce gas, but we have to protect the environment, too. You cannot, look at all the fires around Canada today. A lot of people attribute that to the fact that there is a change in the climate. And we say, fine, but we will not do anything about it. It's pretty irresponsible. So, if they were starving in Alberta, but they're not. They have the lowest income tax of every Canadian. They don't pay the provincial sales tax. They're selling more oil than ever before, and so on. And they want to leave. Come on. At least in Quebec, you could argue that they were poor relatively to Alberta. But now Alberta is not poor relatively to Ontario anymore.
All of this is happening with this big existential question of what happens between us and the United States. Do you think we find our way back to a good trading relationship? Is this a blip, or is there a whole new era ahead?
I think Canada will remain an independent country. I think we'll work with them. We're good neighbors. We help each others. But, we're there. Now they want to have our water. When we signed NAFTA, it was not terminated at the time of Mulroney and Bush. Bush had failed to pass it in the Congress. So when I became prime minister, NAFTA was not signed. It was not voted in the United States. And I had in my program, I had said I would sign, because the Liberal Party had been opposed, if we obtain amendments. The first morning I was elected, the 25th of October 1993, the 26th at 7 o'clock, I had Bill Clinton on the phone. After saying congratulations, he said, what we'll do with NAFTA? And he had only 2 more months because he has a mandate from the Congress finishing in December. And I just said to him, read the program of the Liberal Party. You say yes to it, and you have a deal. And it was not a lot of flack. We had a deal in December. And at that moment, that was not in my program, but I excluded water. So imagine, of course they will need our water, and we have prepared to share it, but it's our water. So they will have to pay for it. We have to be reasonable, but we cannot be stupid.
Do you think we're ready for other changes that might come? Our auto industry, for instance, may be very different years from now?
We always adjusted. The Canada that I knew in 1963 is not the Canada of today. We change a lot, and we change a lot, and we'll have to adjust. And we always feel that we have a big wall in front of us. And now we have to find a way either to go through the wall or above the wall or under the wall, on the side of the wall. But we have to get out and move, and we do that. So I'm an optimist. I've lived that. I told you, started to be involved in politics in 1956. So it's 44 plus 25 is 69 years that I'm reading every morning about Canada political problem. And I like to say I never woke up with a big headline, Canada had a good day yesterday. We must have had one good day. But, a good news is not a news and a bad news is a big news.
Having seen so much, especially politically, but for the country, are there times you look back on where you think are there golden eras where you think politics was better then or the economy was better then?
But a lot of people tell me that the time we were forming the government, it was pretty good. Where they still talk around the globe that we have managed to balance the books and grow at the same time. And still to the day, not long ago, where I am, people came from Europe to ask me how we managed to do it. Mm-hmm. And I said, we did it. It's not easy. There's no easy solution. But, you have to survive. Our deficit at that time was 6.1% of GDP. We were spending 35 cents in every dollar of tax just to pay the interest of the debt. And then when I quit, it was reduced to 14 cents in the dollar. And that gave us some room. So it's why I was fiscally responsible and socially preoccupied. I had money to invest in social programs and so on and reduce the tax and reduce the debt. And so a lot of people think these were very good years. At least I I am one of them that I think it was not bad at all. But it is for you to comment. I'm not the commentator anymore about myself.
I'm actually curious what you think about the extent to which governments don't seem to mind deficits these days. Our own governments, the U.S., of course, everywhere, and the electorate voters don't seem to care either, even though we saw the example that it can be done and it pays off.
Yes, but the reality is what? Our deficit, it is 2% of GDP. United States, 7.1. We have the lowest deficit per capita of the G7. We have the lowest debt per capita of the G7. We don't have major problem with unemployment. We have lack powers in many areas of Canada. So we're not a country in huge difficulty. I think we're doing quite well. And we have room to do what is right. And the Prime Minister seems to be determined to move. He's decisive, something apparently I was, and that I'm happy with him so far. I congratulate him, and I think he will do very well with the other leaders.
What advice do you give him? Does he ask you for your advice?
Well, I've talked with him regularly in the last month, but the last few weeks, no. Because, he has to do his job. I don't want to be the mother-in-law at all, and the coach of the Monday morning. If he needs me, he knows he has my private phone calls, and he will call. And some people call me, but I don't want to be the mother-in-law, as I said. I've done my job, and I observe, and I told him, if you do something crazy, I will call you. And he said, I will pick up the phone.
You mentioned your government and how it's seen. Do you think about that? Do you think about how you're seen and your, I hate to say legacy, sir, but that's the question. What is your legacy, do you think?
You should not worry about legacies. It's a mistake. Because if you have a goal that you want to be perceived as the most progressist leader of your time, that affects your judgment. I never replied to a question on legacies because I would say, you will write whatever you want anyway, and I will not be there to read it. And it is a mistake. And I dropped my guard only once, was in Los Angeles. And the editorial team, one was at the Los Angeles Times, I don't know the real name, was insisting, so I dropped my guard. And I replied, I said, vision and all these things, they are empty words, I said. For me, I'd like the people to write about me that I was competent. Because, a lot of people would say about me I had no vision. And you heard all my speech that we have to make Canada the best country in the world. And I had no vision. Imagine if I had a vision. It's an empty word. It's you look at the result of what you're doing. And I'm pretty happy with what we've done. I had a great team with me, and it was fun. We had fun in those days.
It seems like you still have fun.
I'm still having fun. I'm lucky. I'm 91 years and a half, actually. Somebody said to me that in July, I would have been the longest living elected prime minister. There's two who were senators who died older than I, who were prime minister during the time of MacDonald when he quit. That's good. But I'm still kicking and alive. And I had a little problem a couple of weeks ago, but it was to reopen an arteries, and they've done it. And here I am in my office today talking with you. You can see I'm not dying.
Far from it. All right, then let me ask the question a different way. If we don't like the word legacy, you've done so much, both personally and professionally, because you've had a rich personal life along with everything you've done in public life. What are you most proud of?
To have been elected members of parliament. And after that, when I was sworn in as the prime minister. And the rest, I've done my best. I was lucky because I had spent years in cabinet when was named minister. I was 33 by Mike Pearson. And after that, I spent 15 years with Pierre Trudeau. So I was 40 years on the Hill, elected 12 times. I was 30 years in the cabinet, 10 of them as prime minister. You know, I was leader of the opposition and so on, all the great ministries. So I have a reasonably good CV, but I'm not applying for a job anymore to anybody.
Is there any job in the world that you would want other than the ones you've had?
No, I'm happy, and I'm a happy man. I'm happy where I am, what I'm doing, and hope I will survive long. But in my family, we were 9 living kids. The first trio died, an average of 85. The second trio, an average of 97. So I'm part of the third trio. So I don't know if we'll beat the second one, but you're not about to get rid of me very soon, apparently.
Who would want to?
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Me too.
We've been speaking with the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien. Before you go, here are 3 things we think are worth watching this week. Canada will meet its NATO defense spending commitment this year, hitting the 2% of GDP target this fiscal year. That's about 5 years ahead of plan. While that bodes well for the spirit of moving fast on big items, the target could be moving soon. NATO is pushing for members to up their contributions to 3.5%, but at least it'll make the chat with NATO's Secretary General on the sidelines of the G7 this week a little friendlier. Speaking of the G7, it's one to watch this weekend, with stated priorities ranging from digital transition and economic investment to, yes, world peace, but with the raging subtext of the former de facto leader of the free world in a metaphorical doghouse of its own making. President Trump will attend the meeting, and trade will be very much on the agenda, whether it's officially noted or not. Meanwhile, not unlike the NHL playoffs, we're just happy to have Team Canada at the event at all. Finally, another move by our newly emboldened Competition Bureau, this time taking on delivery firm DoorDash for drip pricing. Those are those fees that show up at checkout only, leading to misleadingly low advertised prices. The Bureau wants them changed, and also compensation paid to Canadians who were overcharged. DoorDash says it will fight the suit, which it calls an overreach. We're not sure how this is going to end up. Just please say we're not going back to the days of having to pick up our own food. That's WONK for this week. Thanks for being with us.